Go figure, that's Irish. Well, are you ready? Boilermakers are. For those of you who don't, let me tell you. A Boilermaker is a two-part drink. First, you have a tumbler of whiskey. You usually down it in one swallow. And then you follow that with a chaser of beer. Now, in my fellow Ukrainian community, I think someone missed the memo because they got it backwards. What they would do is take a sip of beer and then chase it down with a liter of vodka. So those afternoon gatherings got to be pretty lively. But it's amazing. They were all in fun, all good natured. There was never any bad times, no arguments. Nobody ever got into a fight. And you know, I was a 7-year-old boy, and I used to look at this, and I thought, these people are geniuses. On my mother's side, everyone was bilingual. Everyone spoke English and French. On my father's side, my gosh, they spoke 3, 4, and 5 languages: English, French, Ukrainian, Russian, Polish. My dad knew some Polish words also. I was amazed. So this was an exciting time for me. It was like a mini United Nations. Now, jump ahead about 20 years. I had just begun my broadcasting career in Toronto. My father is still a chef, and he's getting feelings of nostalgia for the old country. He would like to go back and visit Ukraine. My father's father died before he was born, and his mother died right after he was born. So he was raised by his eldest sister. She was still alive, and she was in her mid-80s. His childhood friend and his best friend in Canada was Paul Antonuk. And Paul's mother was still alive, and she was in her late 80s. So the two old guys decided, why don't we go to Ukraine and visit all of our relatives? Great idea. So we started planning the trip. Now, both Paul and my dad were really lower middle class, even a step below lower middle class. Just two hard-working guys who tried to provide for their families. But they knew that if they went to Ukraine, they would be perceived as wealthy Canadians, wealthy North Americans coming to visit. So they figured, gosh, we got to bring some presents, right? Okay, what are we going to bring? So they went out and started shopping, and they got these big, beautiful shawls and big bubble studs. And a friend of mine who was in the international trade and had traveled behind the Iron Curtain told me, Alex, if you're wondering what's going to go over well, ballpoint pens. He said, they don't have ballpoint pens behind the Iron Curtain. And he manufactured them. So it's a good idea, easy to transport, so he gave me a handful of them, stuck them in my dad's suitcase, and we prepared for departure day. Now, I took Paul and my father to the airport. They checked their big bags, and they were carrying each a smaller suitcase on board. Now, in those days, before TSA and all the problems we have now, you could accompany people all the way to the gate, right? Some of you remember that? And this was the late 1960s. Mauve fashions were the rage. I was wearing a mauve suit, a narrow jacket, and just before I said goodbye to them, I looked over and I thought, oh my God. My dad never wore a suit, always wore a light-colored sport jacket, which never, ever coordinated with anything else that he was wearing. His best friend Paul had just bought a new suit for the trip, a purple suit, and he was wearing a green tie, and his little carry-on suitcase was held together with a rope. I looked at them and I said, oh my God, they look like two immigrants who have just spent 3 weeks on the boat coming over from the old country to America. But they were happy. They were smiling. They were going home for 2 weeks. Hang on just a second. This was going to be their first airline flight. So I wished them well. I hugged and kissed my dad goodbye. And the day before yesterday, for the first time in my life, I thought of something. And I said, you know, in my entire life with my father, and he died when I was 40, I never shook my father's hand. Not once. All of our greetings, all of our goodbyes, all of our special moments were exactly the same. Big hug and a kiss. And although other cultures do that, I think that is very Ukrainian also. So off they went. They boarded the flight, flew to Amsterdam, and Amsterdam to Kiev. Unfortunately, their luggage went Toronto, Amsterdam, Rome. Now, in those days, there were no barcodes to help you track luggage, so if your luggage went to the wrong place, it was going to take a while to get it back. But they arrived in Kiev, and some of their relatives showed up at the hotel, and they soon discovered that there were a lot of shortages behind the Iron Curtain. One of them was glass. There was not enough glass for jars or bottles. So their relatives came to visit them at the hotel with homemade vodka in hot water bottles. Rubber hot water bottles. And one evening, my dad and Paul were sitting there reminiscing with my dad's older sister and Paul's mother. And there came a knock on the door, and one of the assistant managers came to the room and said, I'm sorry, but it's the hotel policy that single men are not allowed to entertain women in their rooms after 9:30 at night. These two women were almost as old as the country, for crying out loud. But that's one of the wonders of the Iron Curtain life. Well, they went off to Newino, and after about 8 days, they were reintroduced to their luggage. Their luggage had finally arrived, so they started distributing these shawls and babushkas. And what did their relatives do with them? The women? They took the large shawls, cut them into 4 squares, making small babushkas that they could give to all of the nieces and all of their lady friends. Now, with regard to ballpoint pens, there was some officious customs agent who went through my dad's luggage and counted all of the ballpoint pens. There were 97 of them. And he charged them a duty for each pen. And then had the brass to ask for a couple of them as a gift. And my dad, sweet man that he was, gave him a couple of pens. That's the kind of man that my father was. Now, there's one more short anecdote, if you will allow me. And the clergy who is here will appreciate this because it's an indication, I think, of how there is power out there that influences us in ways we never know about. I came to the United States in 1973, and I hosted many television shows. Every time I got a new show, the network would send me off to do promotional activities. And quite often they would send me to New York. And I loved going to New York because I hadn't visited there very much beforehand. And I wanted to explore the city. So I'd go to the Statue of Liberty, Times Square. I visited the Museum of Modern Art, Guggenheim, all over. And one day, one of my visits, wanted to go to the Museum of Natural History, which is right in the middle of Central Park. Now, those of you who've been to New York know that there's Central Park East and Central Park West, two streets on each side of the park, and these streets are loaded with old, classic apartment buildings and hotels with rooms that look out onto Central Park. And as I was walking up Fifth Avenue towards the museum, I came upon a house on the right side. A beautiful, white, rather impressive house. You would call it a mansion. Now, there was something about it that just kind of got to me. Now, Christina, I don't know where you are, but you're in real estate, and you know that quite often when people are looking for a new home, you'll show them 20 or 30 different houses, and it doesn't mean anything, and then all of a sudden, they'll come to one home and they'll say, that's the one. You immediately know if that's where you want to live. Something gets you, not intellectually, but it gets you at the gut level. And that's the way it was with this particular house. I looked at it and I said, gosh, you know, if ever I were to live in New York City, this is where I would want to live. I don't know if I can afford the house, I don't know if it would be for sale, but this is where I would want to live. And I walked a few steps further, and the house was at the corner of 5th Avenue and 79th Street. And I looked over, and there was a plaque on the gate outside the house, and it said, Ukrainian Institute of America. Go figure, that's ours. Slava Ukraine.